Hello, friends. Welcome to the inaugural Main Idea Book Club, where today we have a conversation about last month's book, 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. To stay up to date with the book club, which book we will be reading next, and other ways to get involved, please subscribe to the mailing list in the show notes or visit www.mainideapodcast.com and sign up there. This month, we will be reading The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, and we'll have our monthly book club recording in the last week of January. Today, I am joined by my friend Eric Ruiz. Eric is the head of business development for Google One in the Americas, covering the US and Latin America, co-founder of Eric's Nopales, a family-owned pickled cactus company, and author of Blackout Wednesday, which is now available on Amazon. If you enjoy this episode, please take 20 seconds and leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, or better yet, share it with a friend who likes to read and invite them into the book club. Without further ado, the inaugural Main Idea Book Club, Season 1, Episode 1, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman.
Sad. I've been really looking forward to this for since we had announced it. So thanks for having me,
Well,
man.
you always, we would, I feel like, bounce books back and forth for so long when I
Yeah.
was living up in LA, and you were always struck me as someone who actually reads. Like, a lot of people say they read books, but they really just listen to them on tape, which I don't like poo poo on. I listen to books on tape too, but
Yeah.
there is something different about like physically reading a book and having it in hand, and then many times you're left on the other side of it with like new ideas and thoughts, but very rarely can you bounce them off someone. So it's always been fun here and there through social media or text that we've been kind of going back and forth on different books. So I was like, well, I mean, Eric reads definitely more than I do. So what better person to get together and do this? So I'm stoked you're
I'm
here, man.
humbled, man. I'm humbled. Well, thank you. And I know it's been, I haven't seen you in a while, but I feel grateful and lucky that we've been able to stay in touch and kind of encourage each other from a distance, through jujitsu, business ventures, and just new creative endeavors. So thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked. I've been looking
Well,
forward to this forever.
we got an elephant in the room. First and foremost is that you actually have written a book that you just
Yeah.
released, so that's
Yeah.
incredible. I mean, what was that whole process like?
Oh,
Because
thank.
I feel like another thing, many people want to do a book or they have notes, but actually going through the process of writing it, publishing it, that whole rigmarole, and then you self-publish this book right through Amazon.
Yeah. No, thanks, man.
Yeah.
So the name of the book is called it's called Blackout Wednesday. It's essentially about two friends reuniting in their hometown over the long Thanksgiving break.
Mhm.
And you and I are the same age, right? So you probably remember coming
Yeah.
home from Colorado, and everyone's back in town. You're trying to find like the happening parties and see old
Yeah.
crushes and old friends. And so the whole story is just about two friends reconnecting with each other and their hometown, in this case, Modesto, and trying to sort of come to grips with like the changing realities, right? Because one of the
Mhm.
things that I wanted to explore was as our hometowns change as we change, and so who
Yeah.
you were when you were 16, and then when you're 23, 24, obviously the town's going to go through sort of similar structure. So the way that I framed it was like it's super bad meets the night before Thanksgiving. And
Right.
the process, man, like I've had this idea for several years, working on and off of it, and which is actually a really interesting. This book actually inspired me to finish it, so I'm excited to bring this together.
Sweet.
Yeah. And so when I first got this idea like 3 years ago, it was right before my oldest son was about to be born, and so I wrote like a first draft, and then after he was born, I took some time off from work, and kept going back, refining it here and there for like another year and a half or 2 years. And before my second kid was about to be born, I kind of had like a not a panic attack, it's the wrong word, but I was like, yo, my life's about to get like 10 times more complicated. Like if I don't put my foot to the gas on this, like it may
Yeah.
be another 2 or 3 years, which is fine. But like I think the moment is now. And so, I rallied, finished a few more drafts, had a bunch of people, proofreaders, editors, everyone kind of chiming in to help from a creative standpoint. And then
Mhm.
I've had an agent for a couple of years. She's wonderful. We've worked on a couple projects together. But this is a novella. It's very, very short. And so, well, compared to like a traditional novel, right? And so her feedback was like, look, it just doesn't make sense for a publisher to publish this because they're just the page count isn't high enough. But she gave me her
Right.
blessing to go do it myself, and the feedback's been great. I mean, it's not going to make me a millionaire overnight, but I think for me it was just doing it and like hearing from people like tell me their stories, like their traditions of when they came home for Thanksgiving or for holidays. I think that to me was like the coolest thing of people being like, yo, like we would come home in
Yeah.
Fresno, like it'd be like X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, and that's the feeling that I wanted, just like to capture like this millennial nostalgia.
What was the writing and revision process like for that?
So the oh man, so I think the biggest thing that I learned is you want to get you only want to send it out to like 3 or 4 people that you really trust and ask for very specific feedback. Because one of the challenges that I got on the revision side is that you if like you send out to too many people, you kind of in the back of your mind, it's kind of like you're looking for validation. And I think that's something that I always sort of struggled with. And
Yeah.
so once I kind of reined that in and I sort of like cleared my head out of that like self-consciousness, and I was just like, okay, these are the 3 or 4 smartest friends that have done this before, and I want their feedback on what's interesting, what's boring, and what's confusing.
Mhm.
And one of my good friends, Shane Snow, helped me sort of with that framework. And so when I would send it out to people, I was like, "Hey, you've written something before. Like, what is wrong with this outline?" And they would tell me, and I would go back
Right.
and I would fix it, and I would tackle that in subsequent drafts. And so all of that probably took about once they finished like the last draft, it probably took about another 4 or 5 months to sort of really get it buttoned up because you got to find a proofreader, an editor, and then proofread it again, and then go through final edits. And then it's like little things too that you don't think of as well at the end, where you're like, okay, well, you know, this story as a I used a real person's name as just as a filler because I needed I needed to include a name in this chapter, but I need to change that. So like I have to go back, you know, control find for all the instances where I use this name that I'm no longer using, or maybe because I just changed the character's name. And so it's like little things like that that you don't really think about. And honestly, the most challenging part was probably like once the manuscript was closed and finalized, to then actually put that together, which is cover, interior
Yeah.
design, formatting. That actually took a really long time. And luckily, I had sort of I had smart people to help me with that, like a formatter, a designer. One of my old coworkers at Waze actually helped me put the cover together, and so that was super. That was wonderful. But I really underestimated. Like I thought once the manuscript was done, it was just like, all right, I just do this format, fill in this template, and you're done. But it actually took a lot longer than I thought. But it worked out.
It's crazy how much goes into getting some. I mean, like as a reader, myself included, as someone who enjoys reading books, it's not that you take for granted what you have in front of you, but there's so many hundreds of hours that go into getting it to there between revisions and taking, and this I think is a hard part for many people in any facet of life, is just taking criticism constructively from people that you care about. So when people actually say like, "Hey, this part of the story like, doesn't make any sense at all," or your style really shows through on this part, but it doesn't show on that part, to kind of take that as like they're trying to help you make this a good product, and
Hmm.
not, oh, they're just like ragging on me, and they don't understand the story, they don't understand the character arc, so
They
like
don't get me.
what they're saying doesn't matter. Yeah,
Mhm.
so get it actually going through that process. My grandpa wrote a book. It took him about 14 years. My uncle just published a book, and then my brother
Oh, interesting.
self-published a book as well
Oh, really?
about riding his bike across the country. So I saw like kind of in 3 different generations of the same family the process. And my brother was the first one that like did everything by himself, just because there's so much available now to do publishing that like wasn't in the past, especially with the way Amazon's set up. So you can really kind of like spearhead it. But it was really cool to see that you did that on top of your career, your family, Eric Snowpolis, and then also writing the book too. It's you're juggling many different things, so I respect
Ah,
that quite a bit.
oh, thanks, man. Thanks, man. And, likewise, I think I've seen your progression, with the podcast, and one thing that I thought about as we're reading this is that like, he has that section about staying on the bus, right? Like you
Yeah,
start off kind of imitating, folks that you look up to, which I've certainly done, and then you kind of find your own style
yep.
as you go. I mean, so I guess my question for you is like, what sort of kept you going? Because like, I want to say that almost everyone I've known has either thought about starting a podcast, has started one, but kind of
Mhm.
dropped after like an episode or two. But like you've like just stayed on it, man, and it really like up to the point where like it looks easy, but I know it hasn't been easy. So like, but you make it look easy, and so what's I'm kind of curious as well as to like what
Yeah.
kept you going with that.
Well, thank you. there's many, many, many more days where I ask myself what the hell I'm doing, and very few where I'm like, "Yo, this is the right thing." But I think, I mean, I'm a glutton for consistency in anything, and so I think just going, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it every week, and I'm going to learn along the way. When you do something every single week for, it's now been 2 years, you, what you learn in ability and like skill and your willingness to go and find things out that you don't know is like, it's kind of the only way to move forward, or you get really discouraged. So
Yeah.
from doing all the lighting and reconstructing the shot and upgrading the camera quality and changing the audio quality and the inputs and like learning all these things, it takes a really long time. But I
Mm.
think there were parts in this book that reminded me a lot of this, about like not just the cliche of like enjoy the process, but
Yeah.
to allow yourself to be in the mix of just doing the thing that you're interested in, not worried so much about the end result. Because especially in this industry, in the podcast industry, I mean, statistically, it's worse than acting. I mean, the
Yeah.
amount of shows that start, the amount that are in the ether of existing podcasts, and then the amount that people think of when they think of like quote successful podcasts, it's very, 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 very small percentage of shows are even have an audience, even get past 100 episodes, or even have a some line of income or ad revenue that's coming from it. So it's not something that I think people should do if that's the goal. But
Yeah.
if you love having the conversations, you love getting face to face with people, and that part is really enriching, then the rest kind of does itself. And then you just have to saddle up for a super long ride, which is hard at sometimes, but I enjoy it. I mean, it's the parallels to jujitsu are insane. Like, you think of how many days that you train and you just feel like you're getting your ass kicked, which is
Every
like
day. I still do.
every single day, dude. Every single day that I train, there's a degree to which I'm getting my ass kicked. Even though I'm much further along in skill than I was when I started, it doesn't matter. And then you get to like the end, you get to black belt, and really it just starts there because now you like have the requisite skill to even do it in the first place. So there's a lot of like, I don't know, I'm sure you see some of this entrepreneurially and in other endeavors that you take on. Like, you have to be invested in your vision for what you're doing beyond the shiny newness of the thing. As because week 2 of doing a podcast, all the cool shit that you thought it was going to be about, it's over.
Hmm.
And then you're left with this like, am I going to cultivate this? Am I going to like grow this or not? So it's, I appreciate it's very challenging sometimes, but it's a commitment to consistency and an eagerness to learn and improve, I think, is what undermines it all.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. I love to hear that. And congrats on the jujitsu stripe, by the way. You know, we're both we're
Thank you.
both we're both purple belts, so now we can. I'm excited
Yeah,
to. So next time we're in the same city, we can get together. And
that's right.
yeah, and you said something too about like the consistency, right? And I want to bring it back to this book, which is 4,000
Which,
4,000 weeks. Yeah.
by the way, this is the book that we should have been talking about for the last
Yes.
12 minutes, but we're not, is 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman, which is honestly maybe the best way to close out a year, I think, in terms of like food for thought to take into whatever you're doing in the next year. Was just such a surprising read, thinking that it was going to be about kind of how to, almost what he jokes about. Like, it's almost like I thought we were going to be reading about how to life hack. And
Yeah.
it's such a disregard for that. And it's in a really healthy way. This is the second time that you've read this book, right?
Dude, yes. And so that was gonna be my one disclaimer, which is like there's like 4 or 5 books that I try to reread once every couple of years, but like this one just shot to the top of my list because it
Mhm.
just changed, especially since becoming a father, right? And so like I'm a very anxious person. I work in a competitive industry, so for me, it was always like I could never get ahead of anything. It always felt like I was
Mhm.
starting from behind. So like this book, sort of like came to me at the right moment in life, and I think now that I'm a father of two little boys, it's even more important for me to get a grasp on that because like, and I think he used this analogy in the book too, right? Of like trying to control time is like trying to control a toddler. It's like, well, good luck.
Yeah.
And so for me, to kind of bring it back to sort of what you were talking about with jujitsu, sorry, with the podcast and me with writing, it's like there's a section in the book where he talks about um, I think it was PhD students, like the more successful ones wrote a little bit every day as opposed to going like
Yeah.
pulling like 24-hour writing stints. And I remember when like I really doubled down on this book on writing something, or even the cactus business. I have a day job that I enjoy and that brings me a lot of satisfaction, but it became kind of hard to sort of manage everything all at once. And I would be very hard on myself, like, man, I didn't write my 1,000 words today. I didn't do any of this.
Yeah.
And there's this other thing that he says in the book too, towards the end, which is, just do the next right thing. Just do whatever's right in front of you. That's like the next logical thing. And so between that and this idea of like, write just as even if you only write for a minute, or even if you only write for 10 minutes, or even if you only get a workout in for 27 minutes instead of like the hour and a half that you want, like that still counts. You're still doing the thing
Yeah.
that brings you joy. And so once I kind of shifted my mind to be more like, look, man, it's been a busy day. You have a newborn, you work 8 hours at Google, so like probably even more sometimes, depending on the season. So if all you did was write for 15 minutes, cool. And honestly, dude,
Yeah.
I did that, and then fast forward like a year later, I had like a 70,000 word manuscript. And so for
Yeah.
me, that would to revisit this at the end of the year and to think about, because on the one hand, I have all these ambitious goals for next year, as I'm sure you and most of your listeners do, but I also want to be reminded and kind of humbled to the sense of like, okay, well, remember, like you may get everything that you want, just not at once. So like, how are you going
Right.
to? What happens if you don't hit any of that, right? Which is, I think, something that a few of us struggle with too. When we don't hit the goals that we want to, it's like, well, do I suck, or was it just maybe too
Right.
ambitious, or I don't know.
I felt like this book, one thing that hit me like very squarely between the eyes, which I thought was really important, is it almost dissolved hustle culture, which I've become like very much a product of. I mean, I grew up reading like Seven Habits of Highly Successful People and every sports psychology book I could get my hands on to become a better athlete. And then I was, you know, every waking minute that you're not spent pursuing your endeavors, that's wasted time because the next guy is going to put in the time for that to achieve the thing and they're going to get it sooner. And so I've always just had this like I don't call it anxiety because I wouldn't give it like too much of a negative
Yeah,
connotation, but it's just like this underpinning to everything where I like, okay, I'm doing my day job and I'm training my clients, but that's not enough. So I need to start a podcast, and that's not enough. So I need to do a solo episode on Thursday, but that's not enough. So I need to do a YouTube, and that's not enough. So I need to start a business that's personal training online for people, and that's not enough. So I need to market it. And so it's like I fall into that trap that he talks about in the book of these people that are just they're so spread thin across multiple things, partially because they're unwilling to just look straight on to the one thing that they should be working on or the few things they should be working on. And it kind of gave me like, I almost felt like the book gave me permission to like chill the fuck out for a little bit and
yeah,
be like, you know what, dude, you can be productive and you can work hard and you can do all these things, but you can do it in a way that is like has more longevity and it's okay to like taking a rest doesn't mean taking a rest to smell the coffee and see the flowers doesn't mean that your dreams are going to fall apart.
yeah,
And I was like, it made me like stop taking my phone when I go on walks. It made me shut off all social media channels from 5:30 in the morning to 5:30 at night so I'm not tempted to like just waste my time away. And in the short term it was scary because then you were given all this time to be present and do stuff, but the book like really made me look at that differently, that you don't have to be constantly hustling your ass off or you're a failure. It's not true at all, and the most successful people in the world don't live like that.
yeah, man. No, I love that. And then a follow-up question to that was, because there's another part in the book where he talks about how, we've all heard of the exercise of like, if you take a jar and you fill it with pebbles and sand and then you try to put the
Yeah.
big rocks at the end, like the big rocks don't fit. And
Yep.
the idea being that if you put the big rock first and then everything else, all the small stuff, aka like all the small things you have to worry about but aren't like your big rocks, you can fill in the jar. But real life is
Right.
like you actually have like seven big rocks, so, and only like
Yeah.
two can fit. So I'm curious for you, like everything that you just
Yeah.
mentioned, it's all related to working out and to like sort of like self-actualization, for lack of a better term. But like, how did you decide like what not to do?
That's a good question. I think I started first with what I felt like was not that I knew was wasting time, but what I was unsure how my time was being consumed by it, or how I was letting my time go away. And I'll use the example of Instagram just because it was such a deliberate uh change in how I viewed it. Like, I see social media as this thing that I'm addicted to for the things that I do in work. Like, I feel like I have to be sharing stuff because of the podcast. I have to be sharing stuff because of my personal training business. If I'm not showing that I'm doing active stuff, and my business is going to suffer. And that's just not, it's not true at all. It's one facet of a marketing engine, or it's one piece of
One
material
tactic.
out of like yeah, out of so many different ways that you can connect, that you can be present, that you can grow parts of your business, that you can interact with clients, customers, listeners, whatever. It's just one. And so looking at that as like, basically I thought that that was a big rock, and I
Mhm.
realized it was just a pebble. And I was like, you know what, I don't need that. I don't need that. There are other things that I should be putting my time towards. And I mean, things like family is a bigger, it should have been a bigger rock than I was seeing it as.
Did
And the things like that, but that things like that matter, right? Like the rock thing, I'm really glad you brought that up. It's such a good part of the book where you can kind of envision yourself going through and doing that exercise. It made me also try to only have like one big thing that I'm letting myself work on at a time, and then have subsequent things that I'm able to, but they don't have to be done right now. And in the
Mhm.
past, I've always felt like everything is of equal weight and it all
Yeah.
needs to be done yesterday. Do you have anything like that that stuck out as like a task or a rock, so to speak?
Yeah, it's funny how everything kind of like comes together at once. So a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a colleague, and then kind of in the tech space, and we were talking about he started a pretty cool startup, and he's looking for people to bring on, and we were connected, and I'm always happy to hear people out, and so we got to chatting, and he's like, look. I think there's a role for you here. I can't hire you right now, but if you are interested, and by the way, very happy at Google, in case anyone's listening.
Yeah.
Always taking conversations though, because I like
I'm sure
people.
Google's listening. Google's
Yeah.
listening already, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so he said, "Look, we can't. I've said, I can't hire you right now, but if you are interested, maybe you can, do some consulting for us." And I'm a very excitable person, right? I'm optimistic. I always come in with to things with like really big eyes, right? I'm like, and my first instinct was to be like, "Absolutely, let's do it. How can we get started?" And
Yep.
I literally remembered the lessons of the rocks from this book, and I was like, you know what, man, you know. To be perfectly honest with you, like this is wonderful. This does sound great, but the reality is, I don't have any more space available like in my side burner panel, so to speak, right? Because I have like my day
Yeah.
job, I have jujitsu, I have the cactus business, I have I write when I can, and so I just don't have room for anything else that doesn't and I don't want to replace any one of my four burners with something new right now. So like let's stay in touch and
Right.
very respectfully keep the conversation open. And he's a super smart, super cool guy, and so I think we both appreciated how transparent we were. But for me, that was very much like I think had that been like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have been like, hell yeah, let's do it. And then like a month into it, just been totally miserable, burnt out, and like burn that bridge, and watch the quality of my work decline in other aspects.
It definitely did highlight how we can. I'm very much the same way. I'm excited, optimistic. New ideas are cool to me. The
Yeah.
thought of building things is always fun and intriguing, and you can you can just spread yourself too thin. I mean,
Hmm.
totally. One thing that stuck out so much in this book is the he talks so much about finitude, like the finitude of our life. And I think when you're younger, when you're in your teens and your 20s, you don't really like, you think about existential risk and like where you are in the world, but you don't hone in on it quite as much because you're young and there's just tons going on. And when he talks about how finite our lives really are, and he has several different creative ways of doing this in the book, it's just given me a lot of pause there too when I start to stack up worry about different things, whether it's like work related stuff or personal or trying to get another day of jujitsu in. Is it like, 10 generations from now, no one will know who I am, right? Or no one will know who my family is. Like, it's kind of weird to think about, but when you push it out like
Yeah.
that, uh it's such a your life is such a small blink in an eternally big eye of time that just that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. And when you sit with that and actually kind of like think about it, which is pretty unsettling, he is right in that it gives you this freedom. There is some freedom to that where it's like, man, the day when you're just beating yourself up about something for no reason, or you're so stuck on part of a project or an endeavor and you just like can't get past it. Why? Why let yourself get so obliterated by those kind of things? Because in the end, like it doesn't really matter. And it's been something that has given me pause in the moment to then kind of go like, oh yeah, it's going to be okay. You can missing this one thing that you said you were going to do and putting it out a couple more days is it's totally okay. It's just it is an alleviating feeling.
Definitely, definitely, man. And there's also this idea he kind of hinted at a little bit in the book of like, he references Seneca, like his essay on the shortness of life, which I recommend to everyone. And there's also, I think it was Marcus Aurelius as well who brought up this idea of like, if you almost live your life like you've already died, but you've been given a second chance, so now you try to live the rest of your life as if you lived incorrectly the first time,
I like
and
that.
it's like how much different and better will our lives be? And it's so funny that you mentioned the hustle culture because I was 24 when I started working at Waze. Waze gets acquired by Google. I moved to New York, man. I'm traveling all over the world. I'm single, so I'm very much of that mind state of like more, 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 more. But you know what I regret, dude? Like the thing that I regret the most of like in the past, or the thing is not eating the bread. And what I mean by that is like I was so in love with this idea of like life hacking everything and being the most optimized fit machine to ever walk New York City or come from Modesto. Like I missed out on like the simple pleasures of like eating the bread in Barcelona or like eating the bread in
Yeah.
Paris because I was so obsessed with like this future that I tried so hard to control. And granted, there's something to be said about like obviously taking care of yourself, taking care of your body, but like when you're consistently trading the present, which is all that you have guaranteed for some fuzzy vision of the future, which never
Right.
actually arrives as you expect it. And it's like once it already arrives, you're like not underwhelmed, but you're kind of like, oh, like I'm already like, wait, I'm the present and the future, kind of, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. And so like for me, that was like when I think back, I'm 36 now. So when I think back about like the last 10 years, working in technology and traveling for work and for pleasure, what I regret isn't like doing more projects. What I regret is like not eating the bread or drinking the wine.
I wish hold on. Oh, here wait, let me read this and make sure that this is pertinent to what you're saying, but I underline this. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, so it says, he's talking about Bergson. He said the point that Bergson made about the future, that it's more appealing than the present because you get to indulge in all your hopes for it, even if they contradict each other, which is so like I love how he constantly did this throughout the book, like through each little nugget that he was giving you as he unwinds this whole story about how to basically be here right now doing this because the only moment in both of our lives coincidentally that's actually happening is right now.
Hmm.
He gives good uh just little devices to view how you actually think about the future, and it's true, like so much of look, there are certainly psychological predispositions and disorders that people suffer from, and that's
Yeah.
fact. It needs to be completely respected. But many, I think, are self-inflicted. Like we worry about the future and we're concerned with the past. It's very normal to do this. We all have that exchange of sentiments. But the way that he would show you that, like how much we really are caught up in the future, like, oh, I need to optimize and hustle and create and do this so I can get to this, and then I get a house and I'll do it's that keeping up with the Joneses in real life. And then all of a sudden you blink and you're in the house and you have the job and you are in a relationship and you have kids and now kids are two kids and it's like everything just happens so quick that if you don't do something, I like that idea of the bread, if you don't just sit at the cafe and like eat the eat the damn bread every
Yeah.
once in a while, it really does come and go. And now I'm going to be 35 in 2 weeks. You're
Whoop,
36,
whoop.
and like LA was what,
Four
5
years,
years,
4 or 5 years
four
ago.
years for
Yeah.
you? Does
Yeah.
that not feel like yesterday?
Dude, it
It's
feels like,
crazy.
yeah, it's wild, man. And another idea too that to kind of use your phrase of punching me, square between the eyes. It was the story about the California guy that moves to Tibet and tries to become a monk, and every morning he's like pouring like,
Yes, dude.
yeah, which is like the
Oh, where was
OG
that?
with like the OG cold plunge, right? And so
Yeah,
I thought about that a lot, and in the sense that like when so my
that
youngest
was
son is,
such a good, yeah, such a good
yeah.
note.
And so when my youngest son just turned about 6 months, and he was kind of a bad sleeper, so we'd be up all night of the hour at all hours of the night, trying to calm him down and soothe him and put him back into bed. And my thought process at the time was like, okay, if I have my phone with me, I can stay awake, right? So like I can kind of get through this really uncomfortable thing. Um, I can get through it, right? And looking back, I feel really silly because it was actually when I just like embraced the suck and the moment and the beauty of it, of just like, you know what, my son is crying and he needs to be calmed down, but I'm here to do that for him. And like we're in this together. We're gonna figure it out. And instead of trying to escape it via my phone or by mentally being somewhere else, like it
Mhm.
just made it didn't, it still sucked, but like it was, there was a certain like beauty to it of just like almost very primal of just like being you there with your kid. And so this story of the monk reminded me of just like how often this my suffering is self-imposed by wanting to be elsewhere, because I think that being elsewhere will help me
Yeah,
get through something that could be very uncomfortable. And granted, some things are very uncomfortable and you want to mentally be elsewhere, but like me and you, man, it's like, we work in a fascinating space. We have shelter. We have loved ones. It's like our uncomfortable is really not that uncomfortable, at least for me, right? And so once I kind of got over that mental block and I could kind of just like get into it and kind of be there, not trying to escape it, like it made the process a lot smoother, and it also just made me more connected to my kid, which is ultimately like what I want, right? So like I feel even silly just saying it now because it seems so obvious in hindsight, but it's like, how many times do we try to escape uncomfortable wait times by being on our phones? Or how
yeah,
often do we try to escape, a routine work meeting by mentally thinking about our fantasy football team, you know, championship
totally.
week all the time?
Sam Harris has this, so I use his meditation app a lot, and he has this one intros when you do like the daily meditations, you cycle through obviously a bunch of pre-recorded stuff, but one of them, he has this note on like how when you're doing something, there's a high probability that it could be the very last time that you ever do that. Not because you then die, but just because he gives the example of he used to ski constantly. Like he used to ski as much as he possibly could as he was a PhD student and get up to Big Bear or Mammoth. And he's like, it's been 16 years and I don't know if I'll ever ski again. So he uses that as an example of like the last time that he went skiing, which he can't really remember the exact day, but that potentially was the last time that he would ever ski again in his life. And childbearing, now we don't have kids yet, but I can only imagine when your child is wailing in the middle of the night in their crib and you wake up and you're shot for energy and you're angry and frustrated and like all you want is for it to be over, but there's also some truth to the fact that, like, you might never get to witness your child thrash in the night again. Not that that's an enjoyable thing, but if you can find a way to see the moment like that in
Yeah,
any stressful situation, it does give you a little bit of pause of like, "Oh, wow, I like, this might never happen again." And the holidays are a really important time for this. Like, you go home, I was thinking about this, we went back east to see my side of the family. And when we were leaving, I'm thinking there, I'm like, wow, this week went by so fast, so fast. It's like that. I feel like we got here the other day. And, what if that was the last time you saw one of those people? That's how would that, if you could go back knowing that, how would it change your interaction during that time? And again, that is a little bit of like reflecting on the past and worrying about the future. But if doing both those things allows you to sit in the moment and go, I'm going to really make this the most present experience with this person because it's the only moment that matters, and you don't know how many of those you're gonna get again.
I love that, man. And it's interesting too how like we can know that lesson like in one area of our lives and then like forget it like in another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, like because I've been in situations where I'm actually pretty good at doing this with like loved ones where like, when I see my friends, I'm like, hey man, like I love you, bro. It's so good to see you. And like, I hug them kind of knowing it could be the last time. Not because one of us
Yeah.
is going to die, but because, you know, my buddy lives in Idaho or in Louisiana. I live in
Right.
California. And it's harder to see each other. And then I just forget about then I forget to transfer that mind state to like things I do on a daily basis that are only daily because of the moment that I'm in right now. And I may not get to do again in a year, 2 years, 3 years. Like in the book, dude, where he says like, there will be a last time you lift up your kid, and I'm like,
I I know that part was wild. Like that's what I was talking about. Like we don't have children yet, but reading those parts is like that's intense. You go away, if anyone travels a lot for work, you go away for work while your kid's grown up. I mean, you come back and they went from sitting to crawling. They'll
yeah,
never go from sitting to crawling again, ever.
yeah,
So if you're so caught up in pushing your job forward and hitting this goal and that goal and travel and blah blah blah, that is such a stark example of like truly what you're missing
hmm
when the hustle nature of your life overtakes these very, very beautiful once in a lifetime things that are constantly happening. And that's just a grand example, but the example you use of like waiting in lines. I mean, how many times do you come up on something and you're waiting for it and you're like, this is bullshit, and you're rambling through all the different stuff you could be doing in your head instead of like, I mean, what does it matter? Like
yeah.
be in the line. Oh, which remind me, one of the coolest things I thought from the book was the experiment that he did with the Stanford art professor, where they go
Mm,
and they stare at the painting.
have you
I
done
thought
that?
that was so I've done I haven't done the full 3 hours, but since reading that, I have when I'm like waiting for something or I'm in line or like anything like that, I'll choose something inanimate. Like it doesn't matter. I mean, it could be like a pencil holder or something nearby. Airports are a great place to do this. And just look at it for like a pretty long time, not like a timed amount of time, and definitely not 3 hours. But the point that he talks about how much you start to see within this thing that you otherwise just kind of write off, it's pretty fascinating. Have you done that yet?
Dude, that's that is wild, Megan, and that kind of blew my mind because it's like as I'm reading his description, he's like, and only 17 minutes have passed, and I'm like, dude, that would be me as well. I think
Yep.
I'm actually, I think the least the least anxious place that I am is at the airport, and
Hmm.
my mentality is the following: the only thing I can control when I get to the airport is when I get to the airport. So if I just get there early enough to go through, like it is kind of wild that
Yeah.
I should just live my life like I'm always at an airport. It's honestly, dude, where like I'm the least stressed.
Yeah.
Because all I do is all I can control is what time I get there, right? So I can't
Yeah.
control how fast TSA moves. I can't control if my flight leaves on time. I can't control if they
Yeah.
lose my luggage. I mean, assuming that I don't, that I checked it, right? But once I
Right.
get there, I kind of just like go with the flow of things, and that's sort of like where I'm just like, oh look, there's like I never noticed that there was a Shake Shack at LAX.
Right.
Oh look, so that's when I'm sort of able to sort of kind of get lost in
Yeah.
the moment. So maybe I should just live my life like I'm always at an airport, like I'm always stuck at LAX.
There is something I was speaking with when I was at Equinox, we did a seminar with this lady, Dr. Jennifer Martin from UCLA, and she does a lot of their sleep science and
Mhm,
works in their sleep department. And I was telling her, I was like, every single time, and I'm not exaggerating here, maybe with the exception of once in my life, I get on a plane and before we take off, I'm asleep. It can be red eye, it can be midday, it could be, I mean, it doesn't matter, international, domestic. It's such a high probability that within the first 5 to 10 minutes of being on the flight, that I'm like, I'm fully out. And not that I stay asleep that long, but I'm always asleep. And I was asking her, I was like, what is kind of behind that? Is it cabin pressure? Is it temperature? And I mean, her ultimate answer was like, I don't really know. That's awesome. You should take advantage of that as much as you can.
a
But she
great
was saying that
superpower.
there's something about like what you just alluded to. So much is out of your control at an airport, and so much of getting to like once you're on the plane and you're in the seat, all the things that you had to do are done.
Mhm,
Like the waking up early, the check-in, the crossing the T's, dotting the I's, take the dog for the walk, hand it off to the dog walker, get your luggage, get to the airport, make sure you park, get to the terminal, get through security. It's like all these things that you have to do to get yourself ready to the flight, they're done. And now the only thing you can do is sit back. It's like pure relaxation on something that you're not even driving, you can't talk to the driver, and you estimate that you're going to be at your destination with whatever the time is. So it's this moment of like complete unloading from stress because you don't have anything you have to do.
Interesting.
Now,
Yeah.
maybe that changes if it's like a work trip and you have to do business while you're on the plane, but that that change from like having to do all this stuff to unloading is extremely relaxing. I share the same thing about the airport. I think it, it's stressful up to the moment that you're through security, and then it's like a complete relaxation.
Yeah, because like, dude, all I got to do is just like lay back and, chill out for the next 12 hours or however long it is that I'm going.
When you read through this book, he talks a lot about distraction
Hmm.
and how I mean, different ways in which we succumb to distraction, whether it's playing Sudoku or Wordly, or you're on your phone or whatever. Are there moments that when reading this book, you're like, wow, I really do kind of lean into distraction in these areas of my life? Or was there anything that you adjusted after reading this with regard to distraction?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I get very distracted with like sports, right? Like, oh, like I'm supposed to be writing, I have a 30-minute block to write, but, let me check what's the latest on the Raiders, so
Yeah.
that's sort of like kind of what I gravitate to. And
But
I
they're
can,
trash. Why would you want to look at that? They're not even a good team.
hey, man, you're what, a Broncos fan?
They're in Las Vegas, dude. They're not even a California team anymore,
I
boy.
know. I had to stay loyal though. I just, I chose. It's funny because like my parents are from Mexico, and so when they came here as married adults as immigrants, so
Yeah,
they didn't have a history with football teams. So I could have chosen anybody. I could have been a Niners
that's
fan,
true.
but I chose the
No,
Raiders.
I respect I respect Raider Nation. I respect that part of you.
Oh, thank you, man. Who's your team again? Are you a Broncos guy?
No,
Patriots?
I mean, like, I was a Patriots fan because that was the first team I started watching. I was born in Boston. My dad lives on the East Coast, but to be honest, like, I dropped out of my fantasy football league this year. So this was actually, this is hilarious. Talking, I didn't expect to do this, but talking about distractions. So that was an area in my life where I recognize a huge time contribution between drafting, staying up on the waiver wires, the endless shit talk that goes on between me and my friends that are in the league, yada, yada, yada. And I just realized that I was getting only stress out of being in the league. And my sole fear was that by leaving the league, I would lose access to the text thread that I'm in with all my homies from college.
Mm,
And I got to this point where I was like, you know what? I don't know anything about football. I'm not like a good fan. I don't have a team because I've bounced around so much in my life. This solely sucks time and energy out of my life that I could be putting towards other things. And at the end of the day, if they want to kick me out of the text thread because of that, then I'll take it. And so I actually left the league, and it kind of like took a minute to do it because it was an 8-year league. This is like a thing
that's
for us,
heavy,
right?
man. Yeah, that's big.
And I got an insane amount of shit for it. Insane amount of shit. Uh, but I didn't lose access to my friends or something stupid like that. But it was a recognition of a distraction that for me was a bad trade-off.
Hmm. Dude, well, good for you, man. Because fantasy football is definitely like a big time suck. But I'm in the championship, so maybe I'll retire next year.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If it's fun, like
Yeah,
if you're getting something out of it, I felt like I was losing something in it, kind of
yeah.
thing.
Do you feel
But
now?
it's hard to make those decisions.
Now, here's a question, a follow up to that. To answer your question and how I find myself being distracted, I love to. It's like I kind of do what all like sort of creatives do, which is like, what, I should just re-outline this chapter, or I should just like reorder my desk real quick, or like, let me go on Amazon. I need a new pen. That's what's gonna really like break through this cycle. So that's kind of how I distract myself. So the follow up that I
Yeah.
have for you though is, so you stopped doing fantasy football, which I applaud you for, because it wasn't contributing or helping you in a way that makes you a better Abe, right?
Mhm.
Did you one trap that I see some friends fall into though is that then they'll pick up something else that kind of like becomes that new distraction. But did that happen to you, or were you able to sort of just free up that time purposefully, if that makes sense?
So I was able to free it up purposefully. I know exactly what you're talking about because I was worried that I would do that, and it wasn't like I was sitting there calculating how many minutes I spent on fantasy football every year, and then like being like, oh, this is a week out of my year that I could have back. Not like that at all.
Yeah.
But I think that this book was so well timed. It's been on my list of things to read for a very long
Oh,
time.
that's good.
Well, since it came out, and I think that books are special in that they find when you really finally pick it up and read it. I think there's something special about that. I have a problem with buying books that I want to read, so I have them kind of stacked all over the house.
Same.
And when you find yourself actually picking one up and reading it, it's like you were supposed to. And this book, it it just came at a really good time with this show because being fully transparent, the growth of these kind of things is extremely slow unless you have some pre-existing audience from
Hmm.
celebrity fame, right? So
Hmm.
you're in a bunch of movies and you start a podcast, you have millions of people that follow along in the movies and now want to hear what you have to say. When you're just someone who's interested in conversation and likes the idea of it, there's no one there to listen. So you have to foster that.
Yeah.
And in that process, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of like, I'm going to throw this at the wall and see if it sticks. I'm going to try doing this structure to an episode and seeing if it sticks. And the feedback mechanism you get is just is audience retention and views. And so it's not like you and I sit down, I have a conversation and say, hey, Eric, what did you think about 30-minute Thursday episodes? Was that something that resonated with you? Well, what are some like pros and cons? What should I keep?
Yeah.
You don't get that. You just see high numbers or low numbers, and then you have to make decisions based on that. So this book made me relax a little bit about like,
Good.
dude, you're doing the show, you love doing the show. You get to talk to people and have meaningful conversations, and along the way people are listening and enjoying it. That's enough. Just keep doing that. You don't need to
Love it.
doctor that up anyway. You don't need to triple
Qualify it.
down on some other
Quantify it.
thing. Yeah, totally.
Hmm.
It's like aim for good audio, aim for good video, and try to have continually meaningful conversations across a kind of genre that feels like it makes sense to you. Do you feel like, because again, to paint the picture of Eric, you're a busy person. You've been in the tech industry for a long time. You have a secure, quote, real job, but you've grown, created, branded, and started uh, a product in the food and beverage space, which is extremely difficult. And you just authored a book. So if you're finally having the representation of your work in a physical book, it means that that's been a hobby of yours for a long time, and it's something that you refine and work on. So across all these things, plus having a family, 2 kids, is there anything where you kind of this book made you look at all your irons in the fire and go, maybe one of these doesn't need to be in there, or maybe it doesn't need to be in there quite as long?
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I'm stuttering because I think I'm trying to articulate this. The biggest thing for me related to all of these things is that I was always of the mind that like you have to go full speed on all of these avenues. And obviously, like
Sure.
some of this stuff comes with trade-offs, right? Like I don't really drink, I don't really go out during the week because I'm a homebody,
Same.
so is my wife. So like it's not really so I can find blocks of time because all these things kind of start as hobbies, right? Like the writing, the Eric Snopalis, our pickled cactus business, that have turned into something much more sustainable, for lack of a better term. And so I think for me, what this book kind of reminded me of is to not to fight incrementality. To as long as you're moving something
Yeah.
forward, that's okay. It doesn't have to like you don't have to push something by leaps and bounds. You don't have to move mountains, but as long as you're chipping away at something that's important to you, like you compound that with time. I think that one of the biggest frustrations of our generation is that we want immediate results. We want things to happen right now.
Totally, dude.
Yeah, but that's not how right,
Yeah.
yeah. And you and
100%.
we're in the same, kind of in the same boat in regards to that, but like we're both working on things, and I'm sure many listeners are, where if you just like kind of like take a step back and focus, as Oliver said on his book, like on incrementality, you may not
Yes.
you're gonna get there because there's a sense of inevitability if you just keep doing it. Like, dude, if you just stop, like, I mean, you've helped people with their diets and exercise, right? Like if you keep lifting weights, you're gonna get strong.
Yeah.
So if you keep
Yeah.
pushing on these endeavors, even if it's a little bit, this book, it's only 78 pages, but it took me 3.5 years to write. Like, but I still got it because it meant something to me. And your
Yeah.
your podcast, it's been 2 years, and you're still doing it and getting better at it. So I think for me, the reminder was just to not get frustrated if I don't see immediate results. And there's an Epictetus line. He's one of my favorite philosophers. He said something to the effect of like, you wouldn't get mad at a grape for not um, sorry, like you wouldn't get mad at a bull for not coming to maturity overnight, right? Like it takes
Right.
time. I'm totally butchering it. I'll look this up after
No,
the
I
show.
thought you were gonna go somewhere with wine and the grapes, and I was like, that no, that's
Yeah,
a
and the
really
one,
good.
yeah,
You wouldn't get mad at a grape for not being like a 20-year-old glass of wine or
yeah,
something.
exactly.
It's very true. I really like that that you touched on incrementality, and it's actually, to be fair, it's really refreshing hearing someone else that I look up to talk about it from that perspective because I am such a victim of that whole thought train that you just explained of like not it's not that I'm have a sense of entitlement or that I'm a product of a generation that wants things right now. I have no problem working hard to get what I want. But why I want it should be rethought through,
Hmm.
one. And then two, it is when you constantly are, and this is another departure, like motivator for departing from social media aggressively, is that
Yeah.
when you're constantly shown the fruits of your friend's labor or not labor, and that's an important part, or celebrities' labor, it can be overwhelming that you're not being productive enough or that the things that you're doing will never become uh, what they can truly be because you're always seeing the end result constantly. It's like it's almost like there needs to be an anti-social media that all it shows is the work. All it shows is the failures. All it shows is the crash and burns and aborting things when you have just secured funding and then everyone backs out or like,
Yes.
show all the things that happen that are horrendous. And when you look at most people that were not given where they are, the story really is chock full of that. It's chock full of aborting things, restarting,
Hmm.
being overworked, things going wrong, very, very, very incremental small wins. And then over a 10 or 15-year period, you start to see something that's like recognizable or you see something that's consumable or enjoyable.
Hmm.
And when you look at old generations, I mean, you have our parents are, well, my grandparents, they're coming out of World War II. They've just either lived through or lived adjacent to the most heinous thing in recent years. And everyone wanted stability and they wanted straight trajectory. And
Hmm.
so they doubled down on things that they stuck with for, 40, 50 years. And when you do that, you have the opportunity at least for mastery in something, whether
Yeah.
it's like a craft or a trade or a style or an art form. And yet we can be here on, I don't know how long you've been pursuing the cactus business or this podcast at 2 years and just feel like it's a complete fucking disaster because it's not the number one show in the world. It's 2 years.
Hmm.
It's not
Yes.
even it's nothing. It's literally nothing in the grand scheme of things. People are uh, dedicated their entire lives to becoming architects. They built like a couple houses. It's just the book kind of reminded me to fall in love with the incremental gains, like you said, and then the passion of the skill itself or the passion of the thing itself, and to give yourself up to that a little bit without expectation.
Yeah, man, I love it. And like for you, it's like the pleasure or the payoff is the conversation. It's putting an episode together. It's connecting with
Yeah,
other like-minded people. And then if you happen to get paid on the back end, or if you happen to turn it into
great.
something else, and that's like a nice positive consequence, but it's not like the main thing. And I think to bring it, and then to same thing with me, like I struggled for so long because in my mind I was like, well, I'll never be Mark Twain, I'll never be Ryan Holiday, I'll never be whomever. But that doesn't matter because it's like it's about the art, it's about the thing, and if whatever happens after that is kind of out of your control in some respects, all you can do is you know control the your craft and control your effort, and that's sort of it.
Yeah. Well, I'll read a this was one of my favorite passages from the book that I kept turning back to. And I'll read it to you and then see what your thoughts are on it. But he says, attention, on the other hand, just is life. Your experience of being alive consists of nothing other than the sum of everything to which you pay attention. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's like the book in a nutshell, right? Which is like all we have is
Yes.
like this moment, is like right now life is this conversation, and so many times we try to either hurry through that, or get more attention or just not treated with the reverence that it deserves. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, but I mean that's sort of, I think, kind of like the common thread throughout, throughout this conversation. What about you? Why did that resonate with you?
Oh, I'll finish it too. I don't see exactly where my highlight ended here, but I highlight at night with a book light, so sometimes they're off. So he said, your experience of being alive consists of nothing other than the sum of everything to which you pay attention. At the end of your life, looking back, whatever compelled your attention from the moment to moment is simply what your life will have been. So when you pay attention to something you don't especially value, it's not an exaggeration to say that you're paying with your life.
Mm,
Seen this way, distraction needn't refer only to momentary lapses in focus, as when you're distracted from performing your work duties by the ping of an incoming text message or a compelling, terrible news story. I think that I like this because not that I sit there every day going, what is my life? What is life? What's the meaning of life? But when you look at life through this lens and recognize that, when you look back, for example, to purposely use the past, when you look back on an event, you remember that based on what you paid attention to in the moment. And that's not to say that you should go through life with rose colored
yeah,
glasses and only see things in an overtly optimistic, untrue way, so that when you look back, everything was peachy and incredible. But it is a nod to be mindful with your focus. And I think that's where I definitely tend to get lost as my focus drifts forward, or it drifts backwards saying I could have done more, it drifts forward saying I'm not doing enough because things aren't going to be X, Y, or Z by this time, right? So this passage, it kind of stopped me in my tracks when I was reading, and I was going, wow, like, even my life right now, all it is reading this book. There's nothing else in my life except the fact that I'm reading this right now. And I think of jujitsu in a little bit drawn out case here, because I always feel very present when I do it. I think it's one thing that's kept me involved for as now going on like what, 5 years, is you can't not be there when you're there. Even if you bring in some other baggage in on the day and you're kind of distraught, as soon as you're rolling, and you're either going to be present and paying attention to that moment that is your life, or you're literally getting a shin smashed across your face. So it's like you don't
toss
even have
up,
to
yeah.
choose to be present, right? And it just again made me be like, okay, I'm going on a walk. Can I just go on the walk with my dog? Can I just do that and like pay attention to the sky, or other people that I might bump into
Smells.
that happen to literally be in front of me, that I can talk to and experience life with? Or do I, like today, throw an audiobook and go on a walk and be completely distracted, cross the train tracks with almost forgetting to turn my music off, and like, you know, be completely withdrawn from the moment. So this passage always made me feel like it's a reason to to pause and allow yourself to be doing just the thing you're doing, because that's the only moment that really matters. It's your experiences.
Yeah, dude, thank you for sharing that, man. And it sounds like your walks are a lot more enjoyable. And one thing that I keep thinking back about this, and so a bit about me is, I was overweight in high school, and then I lost a bunch of weight, and it was kind of a late bloomer socially, anyways, just because growing up in sort of an immigrant household, sort of different life experiences. But all that to say that once I started junior college, I kind of hit this mindset of like I have to catch up. I have to do all of the things that I sort of missed out on. And so I was always sort of physically and mentally running around. Like I would be at a party and be like, yo, like there has to be a better party elsewhere. Like this can't be the best, there has to be more to tonight than just this right now. So let's go to the other party. Then you get to the next party, and what happens? You have that same mind, right? Of like, okay, well, this is cool, but like there has to be something else. And you kind of multiply that out by like, you know 2, 3, 4, 5 years. When I got to San Diego State, a part of me was like, no, I have to finish as fast as possible because I want to start my life, right? I have to cram as many credits and get through the things, kind of going through life like a checklist. And partly because I felt like I had to catch up, and partly because that was sort of what I believed was the right mo at the time. But what ultimately happens is that like you're always sort of running away from yourself. You're always, like, and to quote the book from something that Marilyn Robinson said, and I'm reading off of my screen, but the spirit of the times is one of joyless urgency. And that like kind of captured, I think, who I was in my late teens and early 20s, of just like this person that just
Yeah.
always wanted to get through things as fast as possible, because I either thought I had missed out on the past, or because I thought that like, I could do more often. And so that to me is sort of like the it's the bad way to live. It's
Yeah.
like the cause of all of my anxieties back then.
Well, I mean, I think that's the quote in a nutshell is that your experiences, like what you're paying attention to in that
Yeah.
moment, makes up your life. So if what you're paying attention to is your anxiety and your need to be somewhere that you're not,
Mhm.
and an unwillingness to be in the moment, then your life's made up of anxiety and frustration and angst and wishing you were here, wishing you were there instead of being where you are.
Mhm.
But I think it's ultimately it's like the combination of everything in the book. It's all of those little things plus this acceptance of like incremental progress mixed with a recognition of these incredible moments like you were talking about with your child. Like those things, these moments will punctuate a life well lived because you're present and you're able to actually experience them when they're happening. And if you're working on a couple things at the same time that are things that you're passionate about, that you care about, that light you up inside, that's kind of like a win-win-win.
Hell yeah, man. And we just keep pushing the rocks forward little by little. That's all we need.
Yeah, well, let me see if there's anything else in this book that I mean, to be fair, this could be like a 5-hour podcast
Yeah.
because it's there's so much in here
Yeah.
to reflect on. I really definitely think I'm going to do this again.
It's a good yearly reread. The
Yeah, yearly reread with the same notes and see like what sticks out. 'Cause that's another interesting thing to do is to go back and read a book you read previously and see if you highlight or notice the same things.
Yeah, so there was something else that really stuck out to me is I have a quote up right here. It says, "It is often the unsmooth textures of life that make it livable." And
I
this
like that.
yeah, and and to give more context to the listener, it's we sort of err on the side of convenience. We can get groceries delivered to us. We can get coffee delivered to us. We can sort of do everything in a way that minimizes the time we spend actually doing that thing. Whereas
Yeah.
what the author suggests here is that it's you going to the Chinese restaurant that kind of makes that a community. It's everyone sort of
Yes.
participating that kind of gives it the social fabric. And one example that I use is that I can afford to call an Uber. I can afford to call an Uber for my dad when he needs to go to the airport. But one
Yep.
thing I've done very consciously since the first time I read this book was like it's inconvenient to ask somebody to give me a ride to the airport. It's inconvenient for me to take someone to the airport because the closest airport is at least an hour and a half away. But in
Right.
choosing that inconvenience, I get to spend more time with my dad. I get to spend more time with
Yes.
other people. And I sort of have turned it into an opportunity to foster, for lack of a better term, community or other personal relationships in a way that the convenience and of a quiet Uber ride just doesn't do it for
Right.
me, or even just going to the coffee shop instead of just like ordering it in, right? And so for me, this was a reminder as well that it's all those inconvenient moments that you sum those up, like that makes life, that makes it wonderful.
I I love that you brought that up because there's a highlighted part in here that of
Mhm.
the million highlighted parts I didn't think to reference back to, but I'm glad you brought it up because it actually that's another one that had an impact on my day to day. Because I read that section, I was like, wow, we are such like an optimized culture, right? Like everything that you have in your life, you can optimize to be done better.
Or
Instead of talking to
quicker.
people about scheduling a meeting, you can send them a link and you can let them choose the meeting, right? Instead of going and getting coffee and talking to a barista about what beans they have in that day or whatever, you could just set the timer on the coffee pot to make it while you're asleep so you get up and it's there. Like at every turn, the opportunity to streamline something has been streamlined by something and it's enticing. And I was there's this dry cleaner that I take clothes to, and we came back from the East Coast and we both have like these pea coats and they were just covered in dog fur. So I took them to the dry cleaning lady, and this lady is such a sweetheart. Like when I go in there, no one else is ever in there. She's got like pictures of her kids on the wall riding motorbikes, and we talk about like motorcycles, and it's just one of those people that in my life has such a minor role. I see her maybe once every 2 months, but every time I go in there, it's overpriced, and I get to talk to this lady. And when I came back, I think Lauren asked me, she's like, "Oh, did you pick up the dry cleaner?" I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, how much was it?" I said, she's like, "God, that place is expensive, relative to other places around town." And I thought, and we were kind of like just went through that part in the book, and I was like, "Huh, this is one of those moments to a T. Like, this is a service that could be done equally well for a fraction of the cost at somewhere closer to my house, and I could probably have some just like drop it off and leave it." But it's the inconvenience of having to drive to this one location that I just happened to stumble upon one day, and the richness of these moments of
Yes.
conversation with her that actually, I'm not even kidding, they actually like mean something to me. This person has no bearing on my life whatsoever, but the fact that I have to go and be in front of this person's face, talk to them, to an exchange a transaction, and choosing to do that is like, again, it just kind of sticks out as this unique moment that I wouldn't have thought about before. But after reading that section of the book, I'm like, you kind of need to some degree, you want to maximize choosing to do those moments, because they are the like you said, they're the fabric that like kind of weave everything together. It's participating in that part of
Yes.
society that is real, and it's nice. So going in and talking to this lady about motocross or something is like a very lively, enriching experience
Yeah.
that is that to a T.
There you go, man. There you go. And for me, it's doing other family stuff too, where it's like, yeah, I can hire a sitter. Yeah, we can take drop the kid off somewhere else. But like, I want my mom to watch my kid, and that is inconvenient for me because I have to drive my kid, or my mom, I have to wait for my mom, and all of those things. But it's like that is helping me get closer to my family. And so when I can, I'll choose inconvenience. And it sounds like in that domain, it brightens up your day and it helps you sort of like,
Totally.
yeah, it gives you a little kick in your step and like, which, you probably wouldn't get
Well,
it.
it's like the antithesis of all the other stuff. It's the anti streamline.
Yeah,
It's the anti optimize, which I think another thing that this book did so well is he just like dispelled so much of this mindset around streamlining things. It's like, because at the end of the day, how valuable is it to sit with your mother and your kid? Like, there won't be infinity of those
yeah,
moments in your lifetime, right? So it's real. Like, that's a very important thing to value and to put in a position of priority over other things that are easier.
totally, man. I mean, to your point about adopting this and rereading it every year, like, I hope you do, man, because it's like, it's like a strong shot of espresso, the both times that I've read
Yeah.
it. And I think especially wherever you are in life, like as you go through more life changes and whether it's a family or you move or you get a new career, whatever it is, like you'll find that you'll respond differently the second and third time we revisit something like this.
Well, man, it's kind of a 10 out of 10 on our first book here
We
for the book club.
boom.
Yeah, we're just batting 1,000. That means that we have a lot to follow up on. To be frank, I think the structure is pretty fun. It's actually nice to sit down and talk about it and see it in somebody else's eyes.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, we only know our own experiences, right? So to hear, you and I are in similar industries, but
Yeah.
it's still we have different takeaways and different points of view. So this was a blast, man. I'm
Yeah.
glad that we did this.
I think the only downside is that we agreed on everything. I'm curious to see down the line if there's anything in a book that we don't see eye to eye on, or where our perspectives start to diverge, because I think that makes for exciting conversation
Oh,
too. But
definitely. Well, that's the
uh
thing. We had to pick a kind of a non-controversial book to
right.
really build our trust with our
Bring
listeners.
everybody in.
Yeah, bring everybody
Yeah.
in so that they trust us. So that when we go, so when we start reading
Yeah.
books on like social policy, that
Right. We
we
don't want to
yeah,
form factions.
exactly. We don't want to have your podcast split into two or three camps.
Well, this book's probably backwards for everyone, but
Where's my copy? Yeah.
4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman. Oh, you got the clear version.
Yeah,
Nice.
man.
So we'll announce the second book we're going to read. I'm sure everyone who's still listening to this right now is going to get this in like 90 different ways. But Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Very classic and extremely short book. I was surprised to find out, but that will be our January book. So everyone's welcome to follow along. That'll be announced on social after the hours of 5:30 a.m. to 5:30
I,
p.m.
we're muted at that point.
And then we'll do this again in the end of January. Have a little discussion. That'll be an interesting one because um, it's not as it's fiction, so it's kind of going to be interesting to see what sticks out to each of us throughout it. And it's a funny story, so I'm excited for that one.
There's a movie too, right? Am I?
I think they did a show. So it was originally a radio show. It was a radio show, and then he wrote it, and then much later on, he passed away like unexpectedly. I think he was like in his 50s, but then I think Netflix or someone did a show recently.
Um,
Next Netflix, your arch nemesis, isn't it?
no, man. I used to work there. I still got a rep.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Still rep them. Still got some good folks there. But no. So I just googled it because I'm very curious, and yes, it was a movie. I don't know if it was a show though, but now we know that now we can watch the movie as well and come and come. Most Def is in the movie, and Zoe Deschanel. This is great. Two of my top
Oh,
five
wait,
favorite
what?
people. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna have epic harmonizing and fire bars. This will be good.
Yes. Sick.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, maybe we'll that'll be an interesting twist. Maybe we'll watch the movie too and see there's more comparison to go along.
Heck yeah, man.
All right. Well, everyone who listened to this, thank you so much. It's been super fun. We'll find ways to make this even more interactive as we keep going because there's a lot of ways to bring listeners into the fold of people that are reading along. But I hope that this was fun and exciting. I probably talked too much, so I'm going to fix that in the future.
No
But
worries, man.
Eric, thank you, my man. And also check out Eric's book,
Oh yeah.
available on Amazon.
Yes, available on Amazon. Blackout Wednesday.
Yep.
It's a short read. It's
Maybe
fun.
we'll do that as a side review one of these days too. So.
Oh, that'd be fun. Cool,
All
dude.
right, brother. Well, thank you, Eric, for sticking around. This was super fun, and we'll do it again on the 28th of January.
Sounds good, my man. I appreciate you, Abe, and thank you for everyone that listened in. And I'm excited to read some more with you guys.
Hey, friends, Abe here. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and sticking around to the very end. If you want to support it, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or check out www.maynideapodcast.com. Join the mailing list and stay up to date on all things The Main Idea, from future guests, sponsorship opportunities, products I'm using to help me perform at my best, invites to ask me anything, and any upcoming pertinent information to the show. I cannot do this show without you. It is literally why I show up each week and put these episodes together. So thank you from the bottom of my heart from being part of the community. I hope you have a great day.